The wind howled across a frozen landscape, carrying with it the sharp, biting chill of a world locked in winter. Snow blanketed valleys and forests, transforming familiar terrain into a white, unforgiving expanse. For the men and women of the Ice Age, each day brought a delicate balance between survival and peril. The cold was relentless, creeping through primitive clothing and threatening the body's fragile warmth. And predators lurked in the shadows, ever watchful for the weak or the isolated. In this frozen wilderness, life was never simple. Every breath, every movement, every decision could mean the difference between survival and death. Yet despite the harshness, there was light, both literal and metaphorical. The flicker of a shared fire, the warmth of bodies huddled together, and a low murmur of conversation created pockets of safety, moments of connection that became crucial for enduring the long, harsh nights. Imagine a lone figure trudging through the snow, its whiteness blinding in the midday sun, but merciless at night. Alone, this figure would have faced hunger, exhaustion, and exposure, each step a gamble against the forces of nature. But with a group, with family or clan members close at hand, the same journey could become manageable. Sharing knowledge about where food could be found, taking turns keeping watch, and pooling body heat were strategies honed over generations, a testament to human ingenuity and social instinct. Cavemen understood that survival in the Ice Age was not simply about strength or courage. It was about cooperation, about weaving individual lives into the tapestry of a group where the whole became far stronger than the sum of its parts. The winter nights themselves were a character in this story. As darkness fell, temperatures plummeted, turning the world into a realm of shadows and silent threats. The howling wind could drown out the sound of approaching predators, while the snow and ice made even familiar paths treacherous. Within their shelters, whether rocky caves, snow-laden hollows, or primitive wooden structures, humans huddled together, creating warmth not only through fire, but through proximity. The heartbeat of one body could comfort another, the steady rhythm of breath and movement inside the shelter forming a barrier against the chaos outside. There, around the hearth, stories were whispered, memories were shared, and skills were taught. These simple acts were far more than entertainment. They were survival mechanisms, strategies encoded in a culture long before written language could capture them. Fire was central to this existence, more precious than any tool or weapon. Its light pushed back darkness, its heat warded off frostbite, and its flames drove away the ever-present predators. To have fire was to have hope, to have the ability to cook food, making it more digestible and more calorically efficient, an essential advantage when calories were scarce. But fire was not just a practical tool. It was a magnet for community. Individuals gathered around it, drawn by warmth and safety, forging bonds that extended far beyond mere survival. In these moments, human life achieved something remarkable, the blending of necessity and companionship. The cold, the night, and the wilderness outside became secondary to the glow of cooperation and shared presence. Cavemen also developed an acute sense of awareness. They could read subtle signs in the snow to track prey, hear the faintest rustle of predators in the dark, and sense changes in the wind that might signal a storm. Yet even the most skilled hunter or tracker understood that the risks multiplied when facing the night alone. Social groups reduced these dangers exponentially. Watching each other's backs, pooling knowledge about the environment, and maintaining constant vigilance turned what could have been a deadly solitude into a manageable, even survivable, existence. Fear, in this context, was not only natural, but instructive, sharpening senses and reinforcing the need for community. The rhythm of life during these Ice Age winters was punctuated by routine and ritual. As dusk fell, preparations for night began. Gathering firewood, securing shelters, checking weapons, and ensuring that no member of the group was left vulnerable. Shared meals were not merely a source of nutrition. They were also moments of bonding, teaching, and reassurance. Each bite of food represented collective effort. Tracking, hunting, gathering, preserving. The act of eating together forged social cohesion as surely as it nourished the body. To eat alone, by contrast, was not only physically dangerous but psychologically taxing. Isolation amplified fear, drained morale, and diminished the chance of survival. This world, hostile and breathtakingly beautiful, demanded constant awareness, ingenuity, and human connection. It was a world where the flicker of a fire, the warmth of another's body, and the sound of shared laughter or conversation could make the difference between life and death. As the Ice Age descended into darkness each night, cavemen learned a profound truth. Survival was never truly solitary. To endure, they had to stick together, share knowledge, and nurture the bonds that kept the cold at bay. In this harsh environment, community was more than comfort. It was a lifeline. The Ice Age was a world defined by extremes, a planet locked in a cycle of frost and brief, fleeting summers. Vast glaciers carved the landscape, reshaping mountains, valleys, and rivers over millennia, leaving behind jagged cliffs, frozen lakes, and snow-laden forests. The climate was harsh and unpredictable, shifting between sudden blizzards and piercing winds that could turn a sunny day into a life-threatening ordeal. For early humans, survival depended not only on skill and ingenuity, but on a profound understanding of their environment, a knowledge passed down through observation, instinct, and generations of trial and error. Life on the frozen earth was a delicate dance with nature, where every step, every decision, had consequences that could be irreversible. Cavemen were part of a small, mobile population scattered across Europe, Asia, and the edges of North America. They were not yet farmers or city builders. Their lives were entwined with the rhythms of the wild. They followed herds of animals, tracked seasonal changes, and learned to anticipate the dangers and opportunities hidden within the frozen landscape. Mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and reindeer roamed the icy plains, providing sustenance and materials for clothing, tools, and shelter. Yet these animals were both resources and threats, large, powerful, and unpredictable. Every hunt carried risk, and every encounter with a predator demanded vigilance, strategy, and coordination. Survival was not guaranteed, and the margin for error was razor-thin. Vegetation was equally challenging. In summer months, mosses, roots, and berries offered nourishment, but as winter approached, the landscape grew barren. Snow and ice covered much of the edible flora, forcing humans to adapt or perish. Knowledge of which roots could be stored, which nuts could survive frost, and which plants were toxic became critical. Early humans had to learn not just to gather food, but to anticipate scarcity, developing preservation methods and rationing strategies that ensured the survival of the group through the harshest months. The balance of life and death often hinged on foresight, memory, and the collective wisdom of the tribe. Yet perhaps the most defining aspect of life during the Ice Age was its unpredictability. Sudden storms could sweep across valleys, transforming familiar terrain into a frozen trap. Rivers could freeze overnight, blocking familiar routes, or thaw unexpectedly, threatening travelers with swift currents. The same wind that brought the scent of prey could also carry the sounds of approaching predators. In this chaotic environment, adaptability was the greatest survival skill. Humans learned to read the signs of the earth, the movement of clouds, the patterns of animal tracks, the subtle changes in vegetation that hinted at seasonal shifts. Each piece of knowledge was a lifeline, every lesson learned a shield against the harsh world outside. Social organization played a crucial role in managing this unpredictability. Small groups, often no larger than a dozen individuals, became the standard unit of survival. These bands shared resources, watched over one another, and coordinated hunting and gathering expeditions. Within these groups, tasks were divided according to skill, strength, and knowledge. Some tracked animals for days, reading footprints in the snow. Others prepared and preserved food, maintaining reserves that could mean life or death in midwinter. Children learned early to observe, imitate, and contribute, ensuring that survival knowledge was not lost. Cooperation was not optional. It was embedded in daily life, reinforced through necessity, and codified in early forms of social rule and tradition. The dangers of the Ice Age were not only physical but psychological. Isolation in such an environment could quickly lead to despair. Fear of the unknown, of predators, of starvation, or of losing a family member was a constant companion. The harshness of winter nights amplified these fears, driving home the importance of group cohesion. Fires were maintained not only for warmth, but as a beacon of safety and communal comfort. Shared storytelling, songs, and rituals helped to ease anxiety, transmit knowledge, and strengthen bonds. Even in the absence of written language, cultural continuity was preserved through memory, repetition, and the shared experience of survival. The landscape itself shaped human behavior and movement. Natural features like cliffs, rivers, and forests were used strategically for hunting, shelter, and defense. Caves offered protection from storms and predators, while elevated terrain provided vantage points for monitoring game and observing approaching threats. Humans learned to combine natural geography with their ingenuity, fashioning simple tools, traps, and fortifications that increased their chances of survival. These adaptations reveal an early understanding of strategy and resourcefulness, a combination of instinct and observation that allowed humans to navigate a world far more dangerous than any modern city. In addition, the Ice Age pushed humans to innovate in material culture. Animal hides became clothing, not just for warmth, but also for protection against abrasions and predators. Bones and stones were shaped into weapons, tools, and implements, while fire itself was harnessed for cooking, crafting, and signaling. These innovations were not evenly distributed. Groups with access to better materials or more refined techniques often had higher survival rates, highlighting the interplay between environment, technology, and social structure. The knowledge of how to survive was a form of wealth, carefully guarded and passed down within the group, creating a subtle hierarchy based on skill and experience. Despite the constant threats, the Ice Age was also a world of remarkable beauty and abundance. Herds of animals moved in majestic patterns across open plains, forests glistened with frost, and rivers and lakes reflected the pale winter sun. These landscapes were not merely backdrops for survival. They shaped culture, inspired ritual, and provided the resources that enabled human life to endure. Humans were both part of this world and apart from it, a fragile species learning to bend nature's rules through observation, cooperation, and ingenuity. Ultimately, life on the frozen Earth demanded respect for nature's power and reliance on social bonds. The Ice Age was not simply a period of cold and scarcity. It was a crucible that forged the resilience, creativity, and communal instincts of early humans. Each day was a negotiation with the environment, each night a test of endurance, and each season a challenge to be met with knowledge, cooperation, and courage. Survival was not an individual achievement, but a shared one, woven into the fabric of family, clan, and community. It is in this context, the cold, harsh, and awe-inspiring world of the Ice Age, that we begin to understand why cavemen never ate alone during winter nights. Because to face such a world alone was not only unwise, but impossible. Winter in the Ice Age was not merely a season. It was a force that dictated every aspect of life, shaping behavior, culture, and survival strategies. Temperatures often plunged far below freezing, with wind chills that could turn exposed skin into ice within minutes. The human body, unprotected by modern clothing or insulated shelters, faced constant threats from a cold. Hypothermia, the silent killer, could strike suddenly, reducing coordination, dulling senses, and leading to unconsciousness before death followed. Frostbite, another ever-present danger, could render fingers and toes useless, making hunting, gathering, and even simple movement perilous. In this frozen world, warmth was life itself, and the strategies to maintain it were complex, deeply ingrained, and socially mediated. The science of cold is deceptively simple. The human body functions optimally within a narrow temperature range, and when core temperature drops, vital organs begin to fail. Early humans, with minimal protective clothing, relied on physical activity, shelter, and fire to maintain warmth. Huddling together provided shared body heat, an instinctive behavior still observed in animals and humans today. The efficiency of this simple strategy was profound. A small group of individuals could endure temperatures that would kill someone alone. The dangers of cold were amplified by the environment itself. Snow and ice reflected the weak winter sunlight, creating blinding glare during the day and radiating cold back into the air at night. Frozen rivers and lakes offered treacherous paths, capable of cracking under weight, while drifting snow could hide cliffs, holes, and predators, making every step a calculated risk. Cold also influenced metabolism and nutrition. The body requires more calories to maintain warmth in freezing temperatures, and failure to meet these energy demands could quickly lead to weakness and vulnerability. Hunting alone in the winter was doubly risky. Exhaustion from activity without adequate food could lower body temperature, reduce alertness, and make humans more susceptible to accidents and predator attacks. The scarcity of resources during this season intensified competition, making cooperation not just advantageous, but essential. Groups that pooled food, shared hunting responsibilities, and monitored the health of all members were far more likely to survive harsh winters. In essence, winter was both an environmental challenge and a social stress test, revealing which communities could adapt and which could not. Another critical factor in winter survival was moisture. Wet clothing, exposure to icy rain, or contact with snow increased heat loss dramatically. Cavemen learned through experience that staying dry, even at the cost of reduced activity, was vital. Improvised shelters, carefully layered furs, and strategic placement of fires were all adaptations to minimize exposure. Fires were more than warmth, they were lifelines. They created zones of comfort, deterrence against predators, and centralized social spaces that allowed groups to coordinate activities. Without fire, survival during the coldest nights would have been nearly impossible. Anthropological evidence suggests that early humans invested immense energy in fire-making and fire maintenance, recognizing its critical role in winter endurance. The psychological effects of cold were equally significant. Exposure to extreme cold reduces mental acuity, heightens stress responses, and amplifies fear. Anxiety about freezing temperatures, predator attacks, or dwindling food stores could overwhelm individuals, leading to poor decision-making. Social groups countered this by creating routines, rituals, and communication networks that reinforced safety and cooperation. Nighttime gatherings around fires were as much about psychological resilience as they were about physical warmth. Shared stories, songs, and lessons about the environment helped reduce fear, reinforce knowledge, and strengthen bonds, creating a framework within which survival was possible. The cold also dictated movement patterns and seasonal strategies. Some groups migrated to regions with milder winters or more abundant resources, while others hunkered down, relying on stored food and shelter. These strategies required careful planning, knowledge of the landscape, and coordination among group members. Individuals had to understand not only where warmth and food could be found, but also how to travel safely in blizzards, avoid thin ice, and recognize the signs of approaching predators. Winter was not a passive season. It was an active test of observation, endurance, and ingenuity. Predators posed an additional threat amplified by the cold. Wolves, saber-toothed cats, and other carnivores were also forced to hunt more aggressively during winter, following the movements of herds and exploiting the weakness of isolated humans. A lone individual in this environment was highly vulnerable, while a group could implement strategies like sentry rotations, perimeter fires, and collective defense. Cooperation was a defensive mechanism against both environmental and biological threats. This intertwining of survival tactics and social structure highlights a crucial lesson. The cold shaped not only physiology and behavior, but also the evolution of human sociality. Moreover, Winter forced humans to innovate in clothing, shelter, and behavior. Animal hides were layered for insulation, sometimes stitched together using bone needles and sinew, while caves and overhangs were adapted to retain heat and block wind. Fire pits were strategically placed, often surrounded by rocks to reflect warmth and prevent accidental extinguishing. Knowledge about layering clothing, sleeping arrangements, and fire placement was passed orally within groups, ensuring that even the youngest members could endure the cold. These innovations were not merely practical. They were life-saving, reflecting a profound understanding of the environment and the body's needs. The science of cold, therefore, was not an abstract concept for Ice Age humans. It was an existential reality. Every aspect of daily life, movement, hunting, food sharing, fire management, and sleeping arrangements, was shaped by the need to survive freezing temperatures. Solitude was dangerous, almost invariably fatal in extreme conditions. Group cohesion, communication, and shared vigilance transformed the lethal threat of winter into a manageable, if still formidable, challenge. In the icy darkness of night, humans learned that survival was inseparable from community, that warmth and life were intrinsically social. To endure the cold, cavemen had to stick together, share knowledge, and cultivate both practical skills and emotional resilience. Winter, in the Ice Age, was not merely a season to endure, it was a force that shaped human evolution, culture, and psychology. The threats were relentless: freezing temperatures, scarce food, hidden predators, and the constant danger of exposure. Yet within these extremes, humans discovered the power of cooperation, ingenuity, and social bonds. The science of cold was written not in textbooks, but in lived experience, in the strategies that kept groups alive, in the fires that burned through endless nights, and in the shared meals and stories that transformed fear into resilience. It is this understanding, the interplay of environment, biology, and society, that explains why cavemen never ate alone during winter nights. Fire was the defining force of survival during the Ice Age, more vital than any weapon, tool, or even food. For early humans, the flicker of a flame represented warmth in the bitter cold, protection from predators, and a lifeline against the encroaching darkness. Its importance cannot be overstated. Without fire, even the most skilled hunter, the most agile tracker, and the most resourceful gatherer faced almost certain death during the harsh winter nights. Fire was both a practical necessity and a cultural anchor, shaping human behavior, society, and even the evolution of communication. Around it, communities gathered, plans were made, and life endured. Its discovery, mastery, and maintenance marked a turning point in human history, allowing our ancestors not merely to survive, but to assert control over a hostile world. The creation of fire was a skill passed down through generations, often shrouded in ritual and secrecy. Early humans relied on natural sparks from flint stones, friction-based tools, and the exploitation of naturally occurring fires from lightning strikes. Maintaining it required constant vigilance. A single misstep could extinguish the flame and leave a group vulnerable to cold and predators. Anthropological evidence suggests that fire management was an early form of cooperative labor. Some individuals gathered wood and kindling, others tended the flame, while others prepared food or repaired clothing nearby. This coordination demonstrates that fire was not just a physical resource, but a social one, a focal point around which early humans organized their lives. The warmth of a fire provided immediate physical benefits. Hypothermia, frostbite, and exhaustion were constant threats during winter nights, and proximity to heat could be the difference between life and death. Fire allowed humans to dry wet clothing, heat animal skins, and even pre-warm sleeping areas. The flames created a radiant zone that insulated against the icy night air, while smoke and light helped to deter predators. Wolves, bears, and other carnivores were less likely to approach a fire, creating a protective perimeter around the vulnerable members of a group. In essence, fire extended the boundaries of safety beyond the shelter itself, transforming a cave, overhang, or wooden hut into a fortress against the elements. Beyond warmth and protection, fire revolutionized diet and nutrition. Cooking food made it easier to digest, reduce toxins in certain plants, and increase caloric intake, a critical advantage during a season when every calorie counted. Meat that might have been tough, frozen, or dangerous to eat raw became a source of energy and sustenance after exposure to heat. Even small improvements in diet could tip the balance between life and death during prolonged winters. Fire, therefore, was a multiplier of survival, turning scarce resources into potent tools for endurance. Groups that mastered fire use had a distinct advantage over those who did not, highlighting its central role in human evolution. Fire also had profound psychological effects. In the darkness and isolation of winter nights, it offered more than physical comfort. It was a symbol of hope and continuity. The glow of flames created a sense of enclosure, turning open and dangerous spaces into intimate, controlled environments. Humans could see one another, share stories, and communicate across the space of the fire circle. Fear of the unknown, whether of predators, blizzards, or the dangers of the cold, was softened by the light and warmth that fire provided. The ability to create and maintain a flame became an extension of human agency, a way to assert control over a world that often seemed indifferent or hostile. The communal aspect of fire cannot be overstated. Ice Age humans were social animals, and fire became the centerpiece of this sociality. Around the hearth, tasks were coordinated. Some cooked, others crafted tools, while the youngest and oldest were kept close for safety. Fires facilitated teaching and learning, as elders demonstrated techniques for hunting, tracking, or shelter construction to younger members. These lessons were often transmitted orally, reinforced by observation and practice, and embedded within the group's routines. In this way, fire was not only a physical necessity, but a cultural hub, a catalyst for the development of language, social norms, and group cohesion. Nighttime around the fire was also when creativity and imagination flourished. Shadows danced on cave walls, creating patterns that inspired art, ritual, and storytelling. These early forms of expression were not mere entertainment. They were intertwined with survival. Tales of hunts, predators, and ancestors conveyed practical knowledge, reinforced communal bonds, and helped regulate behavior within the group. Fear, when confronted together in the circle of light, became manageable. Knowledge and culture spread more effectively around the warmth of the hearth than anywhere else, making fire a crucible of both survival and civilization. Maintaining a fire in winter was a continuous challenge. Ice, snow, and moisture threatened to extinguish flames, while wind could scatter sparks or intensify cold. This required foresight, planning, and collective effort. What had to be gathered in advance, kindling prepared, and embers carefully nurtured. Groups developed strategies to maintain continuous fire, sometimes passing flames from one shelter to another or keeping coals alive for days. This constant attention reflected an understanding of the environment and an appreciation of the fragility of life in the Ice Age. Failure to maintain fire could undo weeks of preparation, highlighting its critical importance. The fire also served as a point of coordination during hunting and expeditions. Signals could be sent using smoke, flames could indicate territory or warning, and returning hunters could navigate back to the camp guided by the light. Fire's utility extended beyond the immediate circle. It became a tool for communication, navigation, and strategic planning. In this sense, it bridged the physical, social, and intellectual worlds of Ice Age humans, linking survival with culture, cooperation, and foresight. In essence, fire was life. It was the warm glow that chased away the frozen darkness, the signal that humans were not alone, and the center around which knowledge, culture, and social bonds revolved. Without it, the Ice Age was a relentless enemy. With it, humans could endure, adapt, and thrive. The mastery of fire demonstrates how early humans transformed raw survival into a communal, strategic, and cultural enterprise. It was not merely a tool. It was a lifeline, a social magnet, and the very heart of human endurance during the coldest nights of the Ice Age. The hearth, therefore, was the stage upon which early humans enacted survival, community, and culture simultaneously. It was where fear became knowledge, where isolation became togetherness, and where the harsh reality of winter was met with ingenuity, cooperation, and resilience. In this light, we can understand why cavemen never ate alone during winter nights. The fire demanded company, warmth demanded companionship, and life itself was a collective endeavor centered around the eternal glow of the hearth. In the unforgiving winters of the Ice Age, a shelter was more than a convenience. It was a lifeline, a fortress against the relentless cold and the predators that prowled the darkness. The world outside was a landscape of frozen plains, dense, snow-laden forests, and biting winds that could strip warmth from an unprotected body in minutes. Cavemen quickly learned that survival depended on finding or creating spaces that could protect them from the elements while maximizing safety, warmth, and efficiency. From natural caves carved into cliffs to rudimentary huts constructed from wood, animal hides, and bones, early humans adapted every possible resource to their advantage. A shelter was not simply a place to sleep. It was the central hub around which daily life, social cohesion, and survival strategies revolved. Caves were the most reliable natural shelters. Their thick walls offered insulation against freezing temperatures and protection from storms, while their depths provided a secure refuge from predators. Many caves were located near rivers, lakes, or animal migration paths, giving residents convenient access to food and water. Archaeological evidence suggests that humans selected cave entrances carefully, favoring locations with natural overhangs or barriers that could reduce wind exposure. The interiors were often arranged strategically. Sleeping areas were placed near central fire pits, while storage spaces for food, tools, and hides were set at the periphery. This spatial organization demonstrates not only practical ingenuity, but also an early understanding of microclimates, how heat, airflow, and safety could be optimized in a confined space. When natural shelters were unavailable, cavemen constructed makeshift dwellings using available materials. Wooden frameworks covered with hides, reinforced with stones, allowed them to create insulated spaces even in open landscapes. These structures were often temporary, reflecting the mobility of hunter-gatherer groups, but they provided critical protection during the most extreme weather. Insulation was key. Layers of animal skins, moss, and grass trapped heat, while windbreaks reduced exposure to gusting air. The design of these shelters was both adaptive and creative, responding to environmental challenges with limited technology. Such innovation was essential for survival, particularly for groups facing prolonged winters where natural caves were scarce. Shelters were also centers of social life. Around fires within these protected spaces, communities cooked, ate, slept, and shared stories. The physical proximity fostered communication and collaboration, while the heat allowed for extended periods of activity even during the coldest nights. Sleeping arrangements were often communal, huddled closely to maximize warmth and reinforce social bonds. Anthropological studies suggest that these arrangements also had protective functions. Younger or weaker members were placed in the center of the group, shielded by stronger individuals and the shared warmth of the body cluster. Here, shelter and community intersected, creating a network of interdependence that was critical for winter survival. Security was another essential function of shelters. Predators were a constant threat, especially at night when hunting or scavenging animals became more aggressive in search of food. Wolves, saber-toothed cats, and bears could easily overpower a lone human, but a well-chosen cave or constructed shelter offered a defensible position. Rocks, wooden barriers, and strategic fire placement enhanced security, turning the dwelling into a protected compound. Even simple innovations, such as narrowing entrances to restrict access or creating elevated sleeping platforms, increased survivability. Every design choice reflected an understanding of both the natural world and the behaviors of dangerous animals. Temperature regulation within shelters was a continual challenge. Fires provided essential warmth, but the heat had to be managed carefully to avoid smoke inhalation or the risk of extinguishing the flame. Bedding materials, often crafted from layered hides and moss, created insulation from cold floors, while the arrangement of sleeping positions ensured maximum shared warmth. Group members took turns maintaining the fire, fetching fuel, or tending to children and the elderly, reflecting a cooperative system that balanced energy expenditure and survival needs. In this way, shelters were dynamic environments, requiring constant attention and coordination to maintain both warmth and safety. Cultural and symbolic aspects were also intertwined with shelters. Cave walls frequently bore the earliest examples of human art: handprints, animal depictions, and abstract symbols. These markings were more than decoration. They conveyed knowledge, reinforced social identity, and may have been linked to rituals associated with hunting, survival, and community cohesion. The shelter thus served as a repository of both physical and cultural resources, a space where practical life and symbolic expression coexisted. Fire, food, and art converged in these spaces, transforming simple refuges into centers of human resilience and creativity. The placement and design of shelters often reflected strategic planning for seasonal survival. Groups would select sites with access to food sources, water, and defensive advantages. Seasonal knowledge dictated whether they remained in one location or migrated, and shelters were adapted accordingly. Temporary huts could be abandoned and rebuilt, while caves were reused over generations, sometimes expanded or modified to accommodate growing groups. The careful selection and use of shelters highlight a sophisticated understanding of both environmental conditions and social needs. Survival was not merely about enduring the cold, but optimizing living conditions to reduce risk, conserve energy, and maintain community cohesion. Ultimately, shelters were far more than passive structures. They were active participants in the survival story of Ice Age humans. They provided warmth, protection, and social cohesion while enabling food preparation, teaching, and cultural expression. They were the physical manifestation of human ingenuity in the face of environmental extremity. Without shelters, fire would have been less effective, social bonds weaker, and the winter nights exponentially more dangerous. The survival of early humans depended as much on the clever use of space, materials, and design as on hunting or gathering skills. In the coldest, darkest months, the shelter became a sanctuary. Within its walls, the outside world, frozen, dangerous, and unpredictable, was held at bay. Human ingenuity, cooperation, and the instinct for survival converged in these spaces, creating a fragile but resilient bulwark against the Ice Age. It was here, in these protective enclosures, that early humans nurtured life, passed down knowledge, and reinforced the social bonds that made survival possible. Shelters were not simply buildings. They were lifelines, incubators of culture, and fortresses against a world that demanded unity, intelligence, and courage. Hunting during the icy months of the Ice Age was a high-stakes endeavor, a combination of skill, patience, and courage. With the landscape blanketed in snow and temperatures plunging far below freezing, food sources became scarce, and the consequences of failure were immediate and severe. Every hunt carried not only the risk of injury from dangerous prey, but also the looming threat of starvation. Early humans quickly realized that solitary hunting during winter was often a fatal gamble. Success depended on cooperation, careful planning, and a deep understanding of animal behavior. It was not simply the act of killing that ensured survival. It was the strategy, timing, and collective effort that transformed the hunt into a reliable source of sustenance. Large herbivores such as mammoths, bison, reindeer, and woolly rhinoceroses formed the backbone of the Ice Age diet. These animals were powerful and unpredictable, and confronting them required specialized techniques. Early humans relied on tracking, studying migration patterns, and anticipating herd movements to increase their chances of success. Snow, which could impede movement, also provided opportunities. Footprints allowed hunters to predict the path of prey, while frozen rivers and terrain features were used strategically to trap or channel animals. Understanding these subtle cues was a product of observation, memory, and shared knowledge, passed from generation to generation. Hunting was not merely a physical activity. It was a mental challenge, demanding attention to detail, timing, and group coordination. Cooperative hunting emerged as one of the most critical adaptations to winter survival. Small groups would coordinate movements, encircle herds, and employ techniques that leveraged both the environment and their combined strength. Some individuals acted as drivers, guiding animals toward natural traps or prepared ambush points, while others waited with spears, axes, or sharpened stones to deliver lethal blows. This level of coordination required trust, communication, and often a designated leader to direct the hunt. The shared risk of hunting created strong social bonds. Those who succeeded together strengthened relationships, while those who failed alone risked death. Winter hunting was a literal test of teamwork, where coordination could mean the difference between feast and famine. The scarcity of plant-based food during winter made the stakes even higher. Early humans could not rely on the abundance of summer berries, nuts, or roots. Each successful kill provided not only immediate nutrition, but also materials for clothing, tools, and shelter. Animal hides were processed into warm clothing or bedding. Bones were transformed into tools or weapons, and sinew became thread for sewing. In this sense, hunting was not just about food, it was central to the entire survival ecosystem. Every member of the group had a role to play, from the skill tracker to the fire tenders and those responsible for processing the kill. The hunt was a collaborative enterprise that sustained both body and culture. Winter hunting was also a psychological challenge. The cold sapped strength, slowed reflexes, and heightened fatigue. Fear of predators and the uncertainty of success added stress to every expedition. Hunters needed to balance caution with aggression, patience with opportunity. Even minor miscalculations, a misjudged footing, an underestimated animal strength, or a poorly coordinated group maneuver, could result in injury or death. For this reason, experience was invaluable, and older, seasoned hunters often led expeditions, teaching younger members through demonstration, observation, and verbal instruction. Knowledge of terrain, weather patterns, and animal behavior became as crucial as physical skill. Tracking was one of the most sophisticated aspects of winter hunting. Snow and ice revealed footprints, droppings, and signs of recent activity that were invisible in other seasons. Ice Age humans learned to read these subtle markers, interpreting size, gait, and movement direction to predict where animals would appear. They also understood patterns of migration and seasonal behavior, allowing them to anticipate herd movements over vast distances. This knowledge required patience, attention to detail, and collective memory. By pooling their observations, group members could increase the reliability of hunting strategies, ensuring that winter food sources were not left to chance. Weapons and tools were essential to winter hunting. Spears, sharpened stones, and bone implements were adapted to the size and strength of the prey. In some cases, traps and pitfalls were constructed to reduce risk and improve efficiency. Weapons were often crafted and maintained near the shelter, ensuring readiness for expeditions in a harsh environment. Mastery of these tools was learned through apprenticeship and practice, highlighting the interconnectedness of knowledge, skill, and survival. Winter hunting was as much about preparation as it was about execution. Foresight and planning were indispensable to success. Hunting also had an ethical and social dimension within Ice Age communities. Large kills required distribution of meat and resources, fostering cooperation and fairness within group. Those who provided food for the tribe were respected and often held influence, while hoarding or failing to share could undermine group cohesion. Winter hunts reinforced social hierarchies, taught negotiation and compromise, and strengthened bonds that were essential for enduring the long, harsh nights. The hunt was thus both a physical challenge and a social institution, central to the survival and culture of early humans. Ultimately, winter hunting was a balance of risk and reward, danger and ingenuity, solitude and cooperation. It demanded physical strength, intellectual skill, and social coordination. A single misstep could be fatal, but the collective effort of a well-coordinated group transformed the hunt into a reliable lifeline. It was an arena in which knowledge, courage, and collaboration converged, producing not only food but also community, culture, and resilience. The hunt exemplified why cavemen never ate alone during winter nights. Survival depended on shared skill, shared risk, and shared reward. The cold world outside made unity indispensable, and the strategies honed in the snow became the blueprint for enduring life in a frozen wilderness. While hunting provided the most substantial sources of food during the Ice Age, it was not always reliable, particularly during the harshest months of winter. Early humans quickly learned that survival depended on more than just skill with weapons or cooperative hunts. Gathering plants, roots, nuts, and other edible resources became an essential supplement to their diet, especially when prey was scarce or too dangerous to hunt. In winter, these foraged items were limited and often hidden beneath snow or ice, demanding ingenuity, patience, and an intimate knowledge of the landscape. Gathering was not merely a task. It was a disciplined strategy, an extension of observation and planning that balanced risk, effort, and reward. Roots were among the most dependable winter foods. Buried beneath frozen ground, they were insulated from extreme cold and could be dug up with simple tools or even bare hands, provided the soil was not rock hard. Different plants offered varying nutritional value, some high in carbohydrates, others rich in minerals, so knowledge of species was vital. The ability to identify edible roots from poisonous ones could mean the difference between life and death. Early humans developed intricate understanding of the seasons and plant cycles, recognizing when certain roots would be most nutritious and how to extract them efficiently. This botanical knowledge was passed down orally, embedded in stories, songs, and demonstration, ensuring continuity across generations. Nuts and seeds provided essential fats and proteins, and though less abundant in winter, they were often gathered and stored in advance. These small resources were highly prized and carefully rationed. Preservation techniques, rudimentary but effective, allowed these foods to last through months of scarcity. Nuts could be dried in the smoke of a fire, stored in hollow logs, or buried in insulated caches beneath snow or moss. These early storage methods reflect a sophisticated understanding of environmental conditions and the principles of preservation, knowledge that would prove critical to surviving the long Ice Age winters. Preservation extended beyond plant-based resources. Meat from previous hunts was often dried or smoked, sometimes stored in frozen conditions if cold enough to act as a natural freezer. Fish caught from rivers or frozen lakes could be hung near fires to partially dry, extending their edibility. Even fat, highly valued for caloric density, could be rendered and stored for long periods. These practices required careful attention. Improper drying or storage could lead to spoilage, wasting precious calories and putting lives at risk. In a winter where resources were already scarce, the ability to preserve food effectively could determine which group survived and which did not. The act of gathering was also a social endeavor. Groups would send out individuals to forage, often in pairs or small units, balancing efficiency with safety. Knowledge of where certain plants, roots, and nuts grew was shared among community members, and successful foragers often taught younger or less experienced members. Gathering was not simply about filling stomachs. It reinforced social bonds, transferred survival knowledge, and maintained group cohesion. Individuals who contributed to communal stores were valued, and the act of sharing gathered resources became a cornerstone of trust and mutual dependence. Seasonal planning was essential. Summers and autumns were used to stockpile resources for the unforgiving winters. Early humans would gather and preserve far more than immediate needs, creating reserves that could last through blizzards, frozen rivers, and depleted hunting grounds. Failure to plan ahead could be catastrophic. Starvation was a constant threat. This forward-thinking behavior demonstrates that Ice Age humans were not only reactive survivors, but proactive strategists, able to anticipate scarcity and adapt accordingly. Preparation for winter was a central pillar of their existence, deeply entwined with knowledge, memory, and cooperation. Tools for gathering were often simple but effective. Sharpened sticks, bone implements, and rudimentary digging tools allowed humans to access roots, tubers, and buried edible plants with minimal effort. Containers made from bark, hollowed logs, or woven plant fibers enabled the transport and storage of gathered goods. These small innovations illustrate the ingenuity of early humans in adapting to their environment. Even in extreme cold, when dexterity was compromised by frostbite or stiff fingers, these tools increased efficiency, safety, and the likelihood of survival. The balance between hunting and gathering was a delicate one. While large game provided the bulk of calories, it was unpredictable, dangerous, and often seasonal. Gathering, though less calorie-dense, offered consistency and a safety net during lean times. Groups that mastered both strategies thrived, while those relying solely on one method faced higher mortality. This interplay between hunting and gathering reflects a sophisticated understanding of resource management, risk mitigation, and long-term survival strategy, a system in which cooperation and shared knowledge were essential. Winter scarcity also influenced the social and psychological dimensions of life. Food sharing became not only a practical necessity, but a moral and social imperative. Hoarding was discouraged. Communal survival required trust and fairness. Children learned early the importance of contributing to food gathering and respecting communal stores, reinforcing norms that ensured the group could endure the long, cold nights. Social cohesion, therefore, was inseparable from survival strategies, and the act of gathering and preserving food became a mechanism for both physical and social endurance. Ultimately, the strategies of gathering and preservation exemplify the resourcefulness and adaptability of Ice Age humans. They transformed the environment's scarcity into manageable risk through observation, innovation, and cooperation. Every root dug, nut stored, and piece of meat preserved represented foresight, skill, and communal effort. These practices allowed humans to bridge the gap between abundance and deprivation, converting the unpredictable wilderness into a navigable landscape of survival. In a frozen world where danger and hunger were constants, the ability to gather and preserve food ensured that cavemen could face winter nights together, sustaining both life and the bonds that made life worth enduring. In the freezing darkness of Ice Age winters, survival depended not only on fire, shelter, and food, but on the strength of social bonds. Cavemen were not solitary hunters. They were members of tightly knit groups where family and community were essential for enduring the cold, predators, and scarcity. The social structure of these groups was both practical and emotional, ensuring that every member had a role, protection, and purpose. Children were nurtured, the elderly protected, and skilled hunters and gatherers coordinated their efforts, creating a network of interdependence that was crucial for survival. In this world, companionship was more than comfort. It was a lifeline, and social bonds became one of humanity's most powerful tools against the harsh environment. Family units were the core of survival. Parents taught children essential skills: tracking, hunting, gathering, fire maintenance, and tool-making. These lessons were often learned through observation and participation, not formal instruction, emphasizing hands-on experience and practical knowledge. The role of the elder was equally important. They retained memory of seasonal changes, migration patterns, and predator behavior, passing down wisdom that could mean the difference between life and death. Each member contributed to the group's well-being, whether through physical labor, caregiving, or sharing knowledge. The survival of the group was inseparable from the cohesion of its family units, where cooperation ensured warmth, nutrition, and protection. Beyond immediate family, larger clan structures provided additional safety and resource sharing. Groups would merge temporarily during harsh winters to pool resources, share labor, and increase vigilance against predators. The collective effort improved hunting success, ensured sufficient food distribution, and created a more robust defense system. Social rituals, such as shared meals, storytelling, and fire tending, reinforced trust and cooperation. In the Ice Age, loneliness was dangerous. Isolation reduced survival chances and increased vulnerability to both the environment and predators. Unity, therefore, was not only a social preference, but a biological necessity. Mealtimes exemplified the interdependence of these communities. Eating was rarely a solitary act. It was communal, providing nutrition while reinforcing social cohesion. Large kills or preserved foods were divided among members, with priority often given to children, the elderly, and those who had contributed to the hunt. This system encouraged fairness, reciprocity, and shared responsibility. Around a fire, the act of eating together also offered psychological comfort, reducing fear and anxiety during the long, dark nights. The warmth of companionship amplified the warmth of the fire, creating a sense of security that was critical for both physical and emotional survival. Social bonds extended beyond survival. They also nurtured culture, identity, and communication. Early humans likely developed early forms of language, gestures, and symbols to coordinate hunts, warn of predators, and transmit knowledge. Shared experiences, such as successful hunts or encounters with danger, strengthened trust and cooperation. Rituals, songs, and storytelling were central to maintaining morale, reinforcing social norms, and transmitting survival knowledge to younger generations. Through these practices, humans transformed fear and uncertainty into cohesion and shared purpose. Ice Age communities were more than groups of individuals. They were interdependent networks where each member's survival was bound to the survival of others. The emotional dimension of social life was equally vital. Fear, fatigue, and stress were constant companions during winter, and the presence of trusted companions mitigated these pressures. Physical closeness, shared warmth, and verbal reassurance reduced anxiety and increased confidence. Huddling together around a fire or sharing body heat during sleep provided tangible survival benefits, while also reinforcing emotional bonds. Humans had learned that trust and intimacy were as important as food and fire in enduring the hardships of the Ice Age. Psychological resilience was cultivated through community, making social bonds a core survival strategy. Roles within groups were often flexible but guided by age, skill, and experience. Men and women both contributed to hunting, gathering, and shelter construction, while children assisted in less demanding tasks and gradually took on more responsibility as they matured. Elder members acted as repositories of knowledge, guiding group decisions and maintaining continuity in the face of environmental challenges. These roles were dynamic and context-dependent, adapting to seasonal needs, resource availability, and the size of the group. The survival of the entire unit depended on each individual understanding their place and responsibilities, demonstrating the interdependence of skill, cooperation, and social cohesion. Conflict management and cooperation were critical components of social life. Even within small groups, disputes over food, leadership, or resources could arise, but maintaining harmony was essential for survival. Social norms, physical deterrence, and shared dependence on the group encouraged compromise and adherence to collective strategies. Groups that successfully balanced individual needs with communal priorities thrived, while those that failed often succumbed to environmental pressures or predation. Ice Age social structures, therefore, reflect an intricate interplay between human nature, survival needs, and environmental demands. Winter, with its scarcity and danger, reinforced these social structures. Isolation could be deadly, whereas cooperation offered both protection and efficiency. Hunting in coordinated groups, sharing gathered resources, maintaining shelters and fires, and teaching the next generation were all social acts with survival implications. Ice Age humans understood that life in the cold was inseparable from life in the group. These networks of care, trust, and cooperation created a foundation not only for survival, but also for culture, identity, and human resilience. Ultimately, the social life of Ice Age humans reveals the profound truth that survival was never meant to be solitary. Family, kinship, and community provided warmth, nourishment, protection, and knowledge. Emotional bonds were as essential as physical tools, and cooperation was inseparable from endurance. In the freezing darkness of winter nights, cavemen depended on each other as much as on fire, food, or shelter. Their survival was a collective achievement, a testament to the power of human connection, and a reminder that even in the harshest environments, life thrives when it is shared. For Ice Age humans, survival was not only a physical struggle, but a psychological and spiritual one. Long, freezing nights, scarce resources, and constant threats from predators made the environment as much a mental challenge as a physical one. To cope with fear, uncertainty, and the relentless cold, early humans developed rituals, beliefs, and symbolic practices that helped them interpret the world, enforce social cohesion, and imbue their lives with meaning. These early forms of spirituality were intertwined with practical survival, offering both comfort and structure. Fire, shelter, hunting, and food sharing were all enhanced by ritualized behaviors, reinforcing communal bonds and ensuring that fear did not undermine the group's chances of survival. Many rituals were closely tied to the cycles of nature and seasonal changes. Winter, in particular, held immense significance. It represented scarcity, danger, and the struggle to endure. Groups developed ceremonies to mark the beginning and end of the harsh season, often incorporating fire, food, and communal gatherings. These rituals helped structure time and created predictability in an otherwise unpredictable world. They reinforced social norms, ensuring that food, warmth, and labor were shared fairly. By ritualizing survival behaviors, Ice Age humans codified strategies that increased their collective endurance and reduced individual anxiety. Cave art provides some of the most vivid evidence of these beliefs. Animals were frequently depicted on walls, sometimes in hunting scenes, other times in abstract or symbolic forms. Scholars suggest that these depictions were not merely decorative. They likely served ritual or spiritual purposes. Drawing or painting animals may have been an attempt to exert psychological control over prey, to ensure success in hunts, or to honor the creatures that provided life-giving sustenance. By engaging in these acts together, groups reinforced social cohesion and transmitted survival knowledge through symbolic representation. Art and ritual thus merged practicality with spirituality, creating a culture of resilience. Fires themselves were often central to rituals. The hearth was a sacred space where stories were told, songs sung, and guidance passed from elders to younger members. Flames were imbued with symbolic meaning, warmth, protection, and life itself. Special care was taken to maintain the fire during winter nights, sometimes incorporating ceremonial acts to honor it or ensure its continuity. Fire rituals helped reinforce social hierarchy, coordinate communal efforts, and provide a psychological buffer against the harsh, dark world outside. In essence, fire was both a practical tool and a spiritual anchor, a living symbol of human ingenuity and survival. Rituals also extended to hunting and food consumption. Certain practices may have been observed before, during, or after hunts, such as offerings, chants, or communal acknowledgments of animal spirits. These behaviors served multiple purposes. They reinforced hunting strategies, strengthened group identity, and reduced psychological stress. By ritualizing dangerous or uncertain activities, early humans created a framework that made risk manageable and fostered cooperation. Food-sharing rituals, in particular, highlighted the link between survival and community. Even in scarcity, these practices ensured fairness, promoted trust, and reinforced the principle that no one survived alone. Belief systems also included reverence for natural forces and animals. Predators were feared yet respected. Storms and harsh winds were understood as powers beyond human control, and seasonal changes were interpreted as cycles requiring adaptation and attentiveness. By acknowledging and ritualizing these forces, humans developed mental models to navigate environmental challenges. Superstition, symbolic action, and structured behavior helped reduce anxiety, focus attention, and encourage disciplined, collective responses to life-threatening conditions. In a world dominated by winter's extremes, these mental frameworks were as critical to survival as tools or shelters. Rituals served a crucial role in transmitting knowledge. Oral traditions, songs, and ceremonial actions conveyed lessons about hunting, foraging, fire management, and shelter construction. By embedding survival skills within ritual and belief, knowledge became memorable, emotionally resonant, and socially reinforced. Younger generations learned not only the how of survival, but also the why, internalizing rules of cooperation, timing, and strategic planning. In this way, spiritual practices doubled as early educational systems, merging practical instruction with psychological reinforcement. The psychological impact of rituals cannot be overstated. Winter nights were long and perilous, and fear was constant. Rituals provided structure, predictability, and comfort, transforming anxiety into a sense of control. They fostered hope, resilience, and social cohesion, allowing groups to endure environmental extremes that might otherwise have been overwhelming. Fear of the unknown, of predators, or of hunger was countered by the familiarity and shared meaning of ritual acts, making survival a collective rather than individual endeavor. Even death and loss were embedded within early rituals. Funerary practices, memorials, and symbolic gestures honored those who had perished, reinforcing social cohesion and providing emotional outlets for grief. These practices ensured that knowledge, stories, and collective memory were preserved, even in the face of high mortality rates. The cyclical nature of life, survival, and death was thus acknowledged and ritualized, creating psychological stability in an otherwise chaotic and dangerous world. Ultimately, rituals and beliefs were inseparable from survival in the Ice Age. They were not mere superstitions, but structured systems that guided behavior, strengthened social bonds, and provided mental resilience. Through art, fire ceremonies, hunting rituals, and seasonal observances, humans navigated the harshest winter conditions while maintaining community, identity, and hope. In the frozen darkness, rituals became shields against despair, ensuring that fear did not compromise survival. They remind us that early humans endured not only with skill and ingenuity, but with shared meaning and social cohesion, a profound lesson in the interdependence of culture, psychology, and survival. In the relentless cold of the Ice Age, survival was as much about conserving energy as it was about hunting, gathering, and fire maintenance. The human body, exposed to freezing temperatures, required a careful balance of activity and rest. Winter nights were long and harsh, stretching for hours beyond the sun's brief presence, and every individual had to manage their energy wisely. Exhaustion could be fatal. A tired hunter was less alert, a fatigued gatherer could misjudge terrain, and even minor lapses in judgment could invite frostbite, hypothermia, or predator attacks. Sleep, therefore, was not merely a passive state. It was a deliberate survival strategy. Ice Age humans developed methods to maximize warmth and efficiency during sleep. Sleeping areas within shelters or caves were carefully arranged around fire pits, often elevated or insulated with layers of animal hides, moss, and grasses. Communal sleeping, with individuals huddled closely together, amplified body heat and minimized exposure to the icy ground and frigid air. The positioning of the strongest or oldest members on the outside of the group provided an additional layer of protection, while children and weaker individuals were kept at the center, shielded by warmth and shared vigilance. In this way, sleep was both a physiological necessity and a social act, embedding safety and cooperation into the very mechanics of rest. The length and timing of sleep were closely tied to environmental cues. Short daylight hours limited activity, while the darkness encouraged prolonged rest periods. However, rest was often punctuated by vigilance. Sentries or rotating sleepers ensured that predators did not surprise the group. These shifts were subtle, often coordinated silently or through routine, allowing for continuous protection without disrupting the collective sleep rhythm. Sleep and alertness were therefore intertwined, reflecting the dual priorities of energy conservation and survival. Humans learned to adapt their sleep patterns to the environment, creating strategies that balanced rest with the need for vigilance. Hibernation-like behaviors, though not true hibernation, were observed in some Ice Age humans. During particularly harsh periods, activity levels would decrease significantly. Movement was minimized, fires maintained efficiently, and tasks were carefully rationed to conserve calories. The body naturally slowed metabolic processes in response to cold and limited food intake, a physiological adaptation that reduced energy expenditure. These strategies were essential for enduring weeks of scarce resources and extreme temperatures, demonstrating the interplay between biology, behavior, and survival tactics. Sleep, in this context, was a tool for managing energy reserves and prolonging life during winter scarcity. Fire played a critical role in facilitating sleep and energy conservation. Its warmth allowed individuals to sleep longer and more deeply, reducing the body's need to generate heat through constant movement. Smoke, while initially a byproduct of combustion, helped deter insects and predators, creating a safer and more comfortable environment. The rhythm of fire tending, in turn, influenced sleep cycles, as individuals took turns maintaining flames without fully waking others. In this way, fire and sleep were interdependent survival mechanisms, reinforcing both safety and efficiency during the harsh winter months. Shelters were similarly critical for optimizing rest. Caves, overhangs, and constructed huts provided insulation from wind, snow, and rain, while layering of furs and bedding materials reduced heat loss. Choosing the right shelter, preparing bedding in advance, and maintaining proximity to fire were all essential for maximizing sleep quality and energy preservation. Individuals who failed to implement these strategies faced heightened risk of hypothermia or frostbite, which could compromise the survival of both themselves and the group. Ice Age humans understood that rest was not passive. It was an active, strategic component of endurance. Communal behaviors during sleep extended beyond warmth. The social aspect of sleeping arrangements reinforced trust, cooperation, and vigilance. Huddled together, humans could respond more effectively to emergencies, such as sudden predator encounters or structural hazards in shelters. Children learned safety protocols and environmental awareness by observing older members, while elders could monitor younger or weaker individuals without leaving their own sleeping area. Sleep, therefore, was not a solitary experience, but a collective one, embedding social cohesion into the rhythms of survival. Psychological benefits of sleep and energy conservation were also profound. Prolonged darkness, scarcity, and constant cold could induce stress, fear, and anxiety. By establishing reliable routines for rest and warmth, early humans created stability and predictability in an otherwise chaotic environment. Anticipating periods of rest, sharing the heat of the group, and maintaining vigilance through coordinated shifts reduced mental fatigue and improved decision-making. In the harsh winter landscape, these psychological advantages were as vital as the physical benefits of warmth and calorie preservation. Nutrition and energy intake were deeply connected to sleep strategies. Hunters and gatherers consumed food in ways that maximized its efficiency. High-calorie items were reserved for periods of intense activity, while smaller rations helped maintain energy during rest. The timing of meals relative to sleep influenced body temperature regulation, metabolic efficiency, and alertness. Ice Age humans learned to align feeding, resting, and activity in patterns that optimize survival during long, cold winters. Sleep, therefore, was embedded in a broader system of resource management, reflecting sophisticated adaptation to environmental pressures. Ultimately, sleep in the Ice Age was far more than a biological necessity. It was a strategic tool, social practice, and survival mechanism. The interplay of fire, shelter, communal warmth, and rotation of vigilance allowed humans to conserve energy, maintain alertness, and protect vulnerable group members. Long nights, freezing temperatures, and scarcity demanded that rest be managed intelligently, with each individual contributing to collective endurance. In the frozen darkness, sleep was a calculated act, a testament to human ingenuity, cooperation, and resilience. It ensured that cavemen could endure not only the cold but the mental and physical challenges of winter, preserving both life and the social bonds that made survival possible. In the icy wilderness of the Ice Age, survival depended not only on securing food and warmth, but also on navigating a world teeming with predators. Wolves, cave lions, bears, and saber-toothed cats were constant threats, stalking both humans and their prey. Unlike in summer, when vegetation offered some concealment, the winter landscape left tracks in snow, exposed scent trails, and made movement more visible. This transparency increased danger and demanded vigilance, strategy, and teamwork. For early humans, confronting predators was not optional. It was a daily necessity. Every hunt, journey, and night in a shelter carried the risk of deadly encounters, and learning how to avoid or defend against these threats became a cornerstone of winter survival. Ice Age humans quickly learned the power of anticipation. Understanding predator behavior, seasonal movements, and hunting patterns allowed groups to minimize risk. Wolves often traveled in packs, hunting larger prey, while solitary predators like cave lions targeted weaker or isolated humans. Early humans observed animal behavior, studied tracks, and shared intelligence across the group. Knowledge of predator habits, where they hunted, how they reacted to fire or noise, and when they were most active, was passed down through oral tradition and observation. Survival required both fear and respect. Fear to motivate caution, respect to understand the natural order and act accordingly. Shelters and fire were the first line of defense. Strategic placement of shelters, preferably in caves or locations with natural barriers, reduced exposure to predators. Fire not only provided warmth, but acted as a deterrent. Most large carnivores avoided flames. Smoke and light created a protective radius around sleeping and cooking areas, allowing humans to rest with reduced risk. When sleeping in communal clusters, body warmth and presence added another layer of security, as predators were less likely to approach groups that appeared alert and unified. Shelter, fire, and community were inseparable elements of a predator defense system. Hunting strategies themselves were designed with predators in mind. Ambushes, traps, and coordinated drives allowed humans to minimize risk while maximizing efficiency. For example, driving prey toward cliffs or snowdrifts served dual purposes. It facilitated the kill and kept predators at a controlled distance. Hunters often carried weapons not just for killing prey, but for self-defense, prepared to confront attacks from opportunistic carnivores. These strategies required careful planning, communication, and courage. The danger was ever-present. A wounded animal could retaliate, a predator could strike unexpectedly, and poor coordination could lead to disaster. Winter intensified these threats, as cold and fatigue made both humans and animals less agile and more unpredictable. Tracking predators was as important as tracking prey. Snow provided clues. Footprints, scat, and broken vegetation revealed predator locations and habits. Groups that could interpret these signs effectively gained a tactical advantage. Understanding when predators were likely to hunt or rest allowed humans to time movements, choose hunting sites, and manage risk during foraging expeditions. Even minor misinterpretations could be fatal, emphasizing the critical role of environmental literacy. In this sense, winter survival was as much about knowledge and observation as it was about physical skill. Defensive tools evolved in response to these dangers. Spears, clubs, and stone-tipped weapons were standard, often designed for both hunting and self-defense. Some groups constructed barricades around sleeping areas or elevated platforms to monitor surroundings. Alertness was cultivated as a skill. Sentries would watch for predators while others slept, signaling danger without alarming the entire group. This combination of technology, vigilance, and social coordination created a layered defense system that allowed humans to survive in a predator-rich environment. Psychological preparedness was equally vital. The constant threat of attack created stress, but fear had to be managed effectively. Rituals, communal sleeping arrangements, and shared responsibilities helped mitigate anxiety. Stories and warnings transmitted knowledge, teaching younger members how to recognize danger and respond appropriately. This psychological resilience was a form of survival training, allowing humans to face the wild with calculated caution rather than paralyzing fear. In the frozen wilderness, mental fortitude was as critical as physical strength. Predator encounters also shaped social behavior. Cooperation, trust, and communication were reinforced because any lapse could be deadly. Groups relied on coordinated responses. One member might distract a predator while others retreated, or fire might be used strategically to drive a predator away. Mutual dependence was essential, embedding social cohesion into every aspect of survival. The threat of predators created a constant incentive to maintain unity, vigilance, and shared responsibility. Winter itself magnified all dangers. Snow and ice slowed movement, reduced food availability, and increased exposure to hypothermia. Weakened or exhausted humans were easier targets for predators. Groups had to balance hunting and gathering with the need to avoid overexertion. Every expedition carried risk, and decisions had to weigh energy expenditure against potential gain. Survival in winter demanded foresight, planning, and a deep understanding of both prey and predator behavior. Ultimately, the relationship between humans and predators was a complex dance of risk, respect, and adaptation. Ice Age humans were neither dominant nor passive. They were strategic, observant, and highly adaptive. Predators enforced vigilance, creativity, and social cohesion, shaping the evolution of human behavior and survival strategies. By learning to navigate these dangers, humans not only survived the winter, but honed skills, knowledge, and social structures that would endure for millennia. The icy nights demanded that humans remain alert, cooperative, and courageous, demonstrating that survival was as much about intelligence and planning as it was about strength or skill. Predators were a constant reminder that life in the Ice Age was precarious. They were adversaries, teachers, and, in some cases, agents of evolution, shaping human ingenuity, social organization, and resilience. Facing them required courage, cooperation, and careful strategy, reinforcing the necessity of shared effort and vigilance. Cavemen never faced the cold alone, and they never faced the wild alone. Each predator encounter underscored the value of community, fire, and foresight, showing that survival was never a solitary pursuit, but a collective endeavor. Winter survival in the Ice Age was not always about staying put. Seasonal scarcity, predator pressures, and the exhaustion of local food sources often forced early humans to embark on migrations and journeys across frozen landscapes. These treks were perilous but necessary, requiring careful planning, coordination, and knowledge of distant terrains. The ability to anticipate seasonal changes and follow animal migration routes was critical for survival. Every journey carried risks of exposure, injury, and predation, but it also offered opportunities, access to richer hunting grounds, new foraging areas, and safer shelters. Movement during winter was therefore a strategic necessity, blending courage, observation, and communal effort into a complex survival strategy. Tracking resources was at the heart of winter migrations. Groups followed the movements of herds, reindeer, bison, and mammoths, whose seasonal routes dictated the availability of meat, hides, and bones. Understanding these patterns required detailed knowledge of geography, weather, and animal behavior. Observing tracks in snow, noting the locations of grazing grounds, and interpreting environmental cues allowed humans to anticipate herd movements over days, weeks, or even months. This predictive ability was crucial. Arriving too early could mean barren landscapes, while arriving too late could result in depleted food sources or increased competition with predators. Migration was, therefore, a strategic game of timing and foresight. Journeys were often collective endeavors, with groups moving together to maximize safety and efficiency. Traveling in numbers reduced vulnerability to predators and allowed for cooperative transport of resources, tools, and the young or infirm. Routes were chosen carefully to avoid dangerous terrain such as thin ice, deep snowdrifts, or predator territories. When necessary, scouts would explore ahead, identifying obstacles, potential shelters, and animal tracks. These roles required coordination, communication, and trust. Ice Age humans relied on shared knowledge and collective decision-making to navigate landscapes that could change dramatically with snow, wind, and ice. Preparation was essential for survival on these treks. Groups packed tools, weapons, fire-making materials, and preserved food. Clothing made from layered hides, furs, and insulation protected against frostbite, while snowshoes or improvised foot coverings reduced energy expenditure. Every item carried had a purpose. Unnecessary weight could increase fatigue and risk, while insufficient equipment could be fatal. The balance of preparation, mobility, and efficiency was a constant calculation, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of the environment and human limitations. Winter migration demanded not only physical endurance, but strategic foresight. Rest and shelter during journeys were equally important. Temporary camps were constructed along routes, often near water sources or natural windbreaks. Fires provided warmth, cooking facilities, and a psychological sense of security in otherwise exposed landscapes. Communal sleeping arrangements, similar to stationary shelters, allowed for shared body heat and vigilance against predators. These mobile shelters were often smaller and more rudimentary than permanent structures, but were critical for survival, demonstrating the adaptability and ingenuity of Ice Age humans. Even in transit, safety, warmth, and community remained central to survival. Migration also reinforced social cohesion and knowledge transfer. Journeys were educational opportunities, with younger members learning navigation, tracking, and foraging skills from elders. Observing predator behavior, animal habits, and environmental changes during travel provided valuable experiential knowledge. Communal decision-making during navigation, campsite selection, and resource allocation strengthened trust and cooperation. The act of moving together fostered a sense of shared purpose, with each individual contributing to the success of the group. Winter journeys, therefore, were not merely physical movements, but complex social and educational experiences embedded in survival strategy. Environmental adaptation was critical. Winter landscapes were unpredictable. Blizzards, thin ice, and sudden temperature drops could quickly transform a safe path into a life-threatening trap. Groups needed to interpret subtle signs in the environment. Snow patterns indicating predator activity, frozen rivers that could support weight, or tree cover that could provide shelter. Observing wind direction, cloud formations, and animal behavior all contributed to decision-making. Successful migrations required both keen observation and flexibility, as rigid plans often led to disaster. Early humans learned to adapt continuously, turning environmental uncertainty into a navigable challenge. The mental and psychological challenges of migration were as intense as the physical ones. Fatigue, hunger, and exposure tested endurance, while fear of predators and environmental hazards created stress. Trust in the group, shared routines, and coordinated responsibilities mitigated anxiety, allowing humans to maintain vigilance and focus. Migration during winter was not a solitary endeavor. Success depended on the collective resilience, courage, and adaptability of the group. Social bonds, carefully cultivated over months or years, became the foundation that allowed humans to navigate these frozen landscapes effectively. Cultural knowledge was embedded in the routes themselves. Paths, landmarks, and seasonal patterns were remembered and passed down through generations. Oral tradition, storytelling, and demonstration ensured continuity of survival skills and allowed groups to exploit resources efficiently. These knowledge networks also reinforced social identity, group cohesion, and collective memory. Migration was not only a response to environmental pressure, but a structured activity shaped by culture, strategy, and foresight. Ultimately, winter migrations illustrate the intelligence, adaptability, and resilience of Ice Age humans. They highlight the interplay between observation, strategy, cooperation, and culture in overcoming environmental extremes. Traveling across frozen landscapes required courage, planning, and trust, but it also allowed humans to access critical resources, strengthen social bonds, and develop a deep understanding of their environment. These journeys were not random wanderings, but deliberate, calculated movements that balanced risk with reward, ensuring survival through the harshest months of the year. In the frozen expanse, movement became both a necessity and a testament to human ingenuity, teaching us that endurance in the Ice Age was as much about foresight and cooperation as it was about strength and skill. Winter survival in the Ice Age was as much a test of ingenuity as it was of strength. With snow, ice, and freezing temperatures dominating the landscape, early humans relied on tools and technology to secure food, maintain warmth, and protect themselves from predators. Innovation was not optional, it was essential. Every sharp stone, crafted spear, or fire-making kit increased the chances of survival, while the absence of these tools could mean exposure, starvation, or death. In a frozen world where the elements were merciless, human creativity became a lifeline, transforming vulnerability into resilience through practical solutions and adaptation. Fire was arguably the most vital technological advancement. Beyond providing warmth, fire offered light, protection, and a means to cook food, increasing nutritional yield. Maintaining fire in winter required skill and planning. Dry tinder and kindling had to be preserved, sparks carefully nurtured, and flames protected from snow and wind. Fires were strategically placed near shelters or sleeping areas, creating a controlled zone of safety and comfort. The ability to start, maintain, and transport fire allowed humans to extend their activity beyond daylight hours, deter predators, and survive freezing nights. Fire was not merely a tool. It was the center of winter life, a symbol of mastery over an otherwise hostile environment. Stone tools were the backbone of hunting, food preparation, and shelter construction. Sharp flint blades, hand axes, and scrapers enabled humans to process meat, hide animals, and build or maintain shelters efficiently. The design and refinement of tools reflected both observation and experimentation. Certain tools were optimized for skinning large game, others for chopping wood or digging frozen roots. These innovations were adaptive responses to the winter environment, demonstrating a combination of problem-solving, foresight, and manual skill. The evolution of tools illustrates how necessity drove human ingenuity, with each generation building upon the knowledge of the last. Bone, antler, and wood were equally important in technological adaptation. Spears tipped with bone or flint allowed humans to hunt safely at a distance, reducing risk from dangerous prey. Wooden implements, sometimes reinforced with stone or sinew, expanded the range of possible activities, from digging to building shelters. Even small innovations, such as cordage made from sinew or plant fibers, enhanced the effectiveness of tools and enabled more complex constructions. These technologies were lightweight, portable, and multipurpose, demonstrating an understanding of materials, mechanical advantage, and environmental constraints. Ice Age humans were not merely surviving. They were actively shaping their environment to improve survival odds. Shelter construction and maintenance were deeply intertwined with technology. Snow, ice, stone, and wood were used to create windbreaks, insulated walls, and raised platforms. Animal hides and moss provided additional insulation, allowing heat from fires and bodies to be conserved more effectively. Portable shelters, sometimes constructed during migrations, demonstrated adaptability and engineering skill. Choosing the right location, designing for wind protection, and integrating fire safety were all practical applications of technological knowledge. Winter survival demanded constant innovation, as static solutions were insufficient against ever-changing environmental pressures. Food preservation techniques were also technological achievements. Meat could be dried, smoked, or frozen to extend edibility, while plant foods were stored in insulated caches. Knowledge of which materials, temperatures, and storage locations prevented spoilage reflected a sophisticated understanding of natural conditions. Even small adjustments, covering food with snow to keep it frozen or suspending meat near a fire to dehydrate, illustrated practical experimentation and learning. Winter survival was enhanced not just by obtaining resources, but by extending their utility through technological adaptation. Fire-making tools themselves evolved to meet the harsh winter environment. Stones for striking sparks, tinder preserved in waterproof containers, and fire drills or bow drills enabled the quick creation of flame when needed. Fire became portable knowledge. The ability to recreate it on demand meant independence from chance and environmental variability. Mastery of fire-making also reinforced social roles, as skilled individuals became central to group survival. The psychological impact of fire, comfort, control, and security demonstrated that technology influenced not only physical survival, but mental resilience as well. Collaboration in tool-making was essential. Larger projects, such as constructing traps, preparing hides for clothing, or building shelters, required coordinated effort. Knowledge sharing, apprenticeships, and observation ensured that skills were transmitted across generations. This collaborative approach accelerated innovation and maintained group resilience. Winter conditions magnified the stakes. Poorly crafted tools or ineffective fire-making could lead to exposure, hunger, or injury, emphasizing the importance of collective skill and technological literacy. Winter survival also drove creativity in problem-solving. When faced with frozen rivers, thick snow, or windswept terrain, humans adapted existing tools or invented new ones. Snowshoes, sleds, and insulated clothing illustrate responses to environmental constraints. Observation of animals and natural materials inspired innovations, showing that Ice Age humans were keen experimenters who learned from their surroundings. Adaptation was continuous. Each winter brought new challenges, and survival depended on iterative improvement, experimentation, and innovation. Ultimately, tools, fire, and technological adaptation exemplify the ingenuity that allowed humans to endure Ice Age winters. Technology transformed vulnerability into capability, enabling efficient hunting, secure shelters, food preservation, and protection from predators. It was inseparable from social cohesion, as skills, knowledge, and techniques were shared, refined, and passed down through generations. In a frozen, dangerous world, innovation was not a luxury, but a necessity, proof that human survival relied on intelligence, creativity, and cooperation as much as on strength and endurance. Tools and fire were more than implements. They were lifelines, symbols of mastery over nature, and the keys to thriving in a world of relentless winter. Winter in the Ice Age was an unforgiving adversary. Temperatures plunged far below freezing, winds howled across barren landscapes, and snow and ice dominated the terrain. Survival required more than fire and food. It demanded protection against the elements. Clothing and shelter became essential tools, forming a personal and communal armor that allowed early humans to endure the bitter cold. Each layer, each hide, and each structural innovation was a product of observation, experimentation, and cultural knowledge. Mastery of these adaptations was the difference between life and death during long, frozen nights. Clothing was both functional and adaptive. Animal hides, furs, and pelts were the primary materials, chosen for their insulating properties. Thicker furs from larger animals were used for outer layers, while softer, thinner hides protected more delicate areas, such as the hands, feet, and face. Clothing was designed to trap body heat while permitting mobility, crucial for hunting, gathering, and defending against predators. Furs were often layered, and seams were stitched with sinew or plant fibers to ensure durability and fit. In addition to insulation, clothing provided protection against abrasions from ice, snow, and sharp vegetation, highlighting the dual functional and protective role of garments. Footwear was equally critical. Frostbite was a constant threat, and humans developed solutions that allowed them to traverse frozen landscapes safely. Thick-soled boots made from layered hides, sometimes stuffed with insulating moss or fur, protected the feet from extreme cold and snow. Binding materials, such as sinew or woven fibers, secured footwear against slippage and wear. Properly designed shoes enabled hunting, foraging, and migration, extending human activity during winter hours when bare feet would have made movement impossible. The evolution of effective footwear demonstrates early humans' practical understanding of both anatomy and environmental demands. Shelters complemented clothing, forming a second line of defense against winter's harshness. Natural formations such as caves, overhangs, and rock shelters offered initial protection from wind and snow. However, humans frequently enhanced these natural shelters with constructed elements. Stone walls, snow barriers, and windbreaks reduced exposure to the elements, while layered bedding of moss, grasses, and furs insulated sleeping areas from frozen ground. Fire placement was strategic, maximizing warmth without risking sparks or smoke inhalation. Shelters were not merely places to sleep. They were living spaces optimized for survival, comfort, and social cohesion. Temporary shelters played an essential role during migrations. Ice Age humans were highly mobile when following herds or searching for food, and they adapted their building techniques accordingly. Lightweight, portable structures made from wood, hides, and bones could be erected quickly in snowbound landscapes. These constructions provided essential protection from wind and predators, allowed for fire use, and facilitated communal living even on the move. The ability to create both permanent and temporary shelters highlights the flexibility and problem-solving skills of early humans. Adaptation to different environments was central to their winter survival strategy. The integration of clothing and shelter created a comprehensive system of thermal regulation. Warm clothing trapped heat close to the body, while insulated shelters preserved ambient warmth. Communal sleeping arrangements amplified the effect, as body heat from multiple individuals was shared within a confined space. Fires maintained consistent temperatures, and smoke helped deter predators, creating an environment that was both safe and survivable. The combination of clothing, shelter, and fire demonstrates the holistic approach Ice Age humans used to confront extreme cold. No single element was sufficient, but together they created a resilient survival system. Clothing and shelter were also sites of technological innovation. Sewing tools, needles made from bone or wood, and cordage allowed for customized garments and durable shelter construction. Observation of animal behaviors, such as nesting or fur thickness, inspired improvements in insulation and layering. Ice Age humans experimented continuously, learning which combinations of materials and designs worked best under different conditions. These innovations reveal not only practical ingenuity, but an understanding of material properties, environmental interaction, and human physiology. Survival demanded both creativity and empirical observation. Social dynamics influenced clothing and shelter as well. Skills in crafting furs and constructing shelters were often shared, taught, and refined collectively. Certain members specialized in clothing preparation, hide processing, or insulation techniques, while others focused on construction or maintenance. Knowledge transmission ensured that survival skills persisted across generations, and communal involvement strengthened social bonds. In this sense, winter adaptations were not only physical but also social, embedding cooperation, skill sharing, and mentorship into the very act of survival. Winter survival was a balance of strategy, resource management, and technological application. Clothing and shelter represented both preparation and continuous adaptation. As temperatures dropped and nights lengthened, humans relied on these innovations to conserve energy, maintain mobility, and protect against injury and illness. Each decision, layering furs, building insulated walls, arranging sleeping positions, reflected accumulated experience and knowledge honed over countless winters. The sophistication of these adaptations highlights the intelligence, foresight, and resilience of Ice Age humans. Ultimately, clothing and shelter were more than protection. They were lifelines. They enabled hunting, migration, communal living, and energy conservation, while also fostering social cohesion and knowledge transmission. By combining practical technology with strategic planning, Ice Age humans transformed the harshest landscapes into habitable spaces. Their ingenuity ensured that even in the most extreme winter conditions, survival was possible, not just for individuals, but for entire groups bound together by shared effort, skill, and adaptation. In a frozen world where danger was omnipresent, these innovations were the armor that made life sustainable. In the frozen landscapes of the Ice Age, hunting was not simply a means of sustenance. It was a finely tuned survival strategy. The winter environment imposed unique challenges. Snow obscured tracks, ice made movement treacherous, and prey became more scarce and vigilant. To thrive under these conditions, early humans relied on cooperation, careful planning, and sophisticated tactics that maximized efficiency while minimizing risk. Winter hunts demanded not only physical skill but strategic intelligence, social coordination, and precise timing. The difference between success and failure could determine the survival of an entire group. Cooperative hunting was the cornerstone of winter strategy. Humans rarely hunted alone. Collaboration increased the chances of success and reduced exposure to predators. Groups coordinated roles meticulously. Some individuals drove prey toward ambush sites, while others lay in wait with weapons ready. Communication, often nonverbal or signaled through subtle gestures, allowed hunters to coordinate movement silently, avoiding alerting prey. This complex choreography required trust, experience, and situational awareness, highlighting how social cohesion was inseparable from survival. A single misstep could scatter the herd, waste energy, or provoke a dangerous encounter with predators. Trapping and environmental manipulation were key techniques. Hunters used natural features like cliffs, ravines, and frozen rivers to funnel animals into confined areas. Simple constructions, such as snow walls or hidden pits, increased the effectiveness of these ambushes. Ice Age humans understood animal behavior intimately, predicting herd movement, foraging patterns, and escape routes. By controlling the environment, hunters turned the landscape into an ally, reducing physical exertion while increasing the likelihood of a successful kill. Winter hunting was a combination of intelligence, observation, and strategic manipulation of terrain. Weapons technology was crucial in these winter hunts. Spears, often tipped with flint, bone, or antler, allowed hunters to strike from a distance, reducing personal risk. Throwing sticks, bows, and clubs were employed, depending on prey size and behavior. Tools were not one-size-fits-all. Different animals required different approaches, and hunters adapted their equipment accordingly. Mastery of weapons, combined with environmental knowledge and social coordination, made humans formidable predators in their own right, capable of taking down prey many times their size. Tracking skills were indispensable. Snow provided clear signs of animal movement, but it also revealed human presence. Skilled hunters learned to read tracks for speed, direction, and group composition while masking their own approach. Wind direction, scent patterns, and subtle environmental cues informed strategies, ensuring hunters remained undetected. Tracking was a cognitive exercise as much as a physical one, combining memory, observation, and predictive reasoning. Success depended on the ability to interpret the landscape accurately and anticipate the prey's behavior, often over long distances or extended periods. Winter hunts also demanded energy management. The cold increased caloric needs, yet overexertion could result in hypothermia or frostbite. Teams carefully coordinated physical effort, alternating between active pursuit and strategic waiting. Rest periods were planned near natural shelters or fires to conserve heat and reduce fatigue. This balance of activity and rest allowed humans to maintain endurance for long, unpredictable hunts, turning energy conservation into a tactical advantage. Winter hunting was as much about pacing and strategy as it was about speed and strength. Social dynamics were deeply integrated into hunting practices. Successful hunts reinforced hierarchy, trust, and reciprocity within a group. Experienced hunters guided novices, transmitting knowledge of tracking, weapon use, and herd behavior. Sharing of the kill ensured equitable distribution of resources, reinforcing fairness and cooperation. Hunting, therefore, was both a practical activity and a social ritual, strengthening bonds and embedding survival strategies into the fabric of daily life. Without collaboration and coordination, the risks of winter hunting could easily outweigh the benefits. Preparation for winter hunts extended beyond weapons and knowledge. Clothing, fire, and temporary shelters played supporting roles, allowing hunters to withstand freezing conditions while waiting for prey. Snowshoes or insulated boots enabled stealthy movement across ice and deep snow, while fire allowed teams to maintain warmth during prolonged waits. Even small technological and logistical preparations could dramatically improve outcomes, illustrating the interconnectedness of all survival strategies in winter. Each element, skill, equipment, and environment was part of a larger, integrated system. Psychological resilience was equally vital. Tracking, waiting, and stalking prey in harsh winter conditions required patience and mental focus. Fear, fatigue, and stress had to be managed collectively, with experienced hunters modeling calm and effective behavior. The emotional stakes were high. Failure could mean hunger, while success ensured survival and a social cohesion. Winter hunting was therefore as much a test of mental fortitude as physical ability, reinforcing the importance of community support, shared knowledge, and coordinated effort. Ultimately, winter hunting demonstrates the remarkable adaptability and intelligence of Ice Age humans. Through cooperation, strategic planning, technological innovation, and environmental mastery, they turned a harsh, frozen world into a domain where survival was possible. Hunting was not an isolated task, but a complex interplay of skill, culture, social structure, and environmental understanding. Every coordinated drive, ambush, and carefully timed strike was a testament to human ingenuity, demonstrating that survival in the coldest months depended as much on planning and collaboration as on strength or speed. The success of these strategies highlights a profound truth. Humans survived winter not by brute force alone, but by harnessing knowledge, cooperation, and technology. In a world of predators, scarcity, and freezing nights, winter hunts became both a practical and social cornerstone of life, reinforcing bonds, sustaining communities, and ensuring that life could persist even in the harshest conditions. For Ice Age humans, every successful kill was more than food. It was proof of ingenuity, collaboration, and the relentless drive to endure. As the Ice Age winter stretched across vast landscapes, humans faced an environment that was as beautiful as it was merciless. Freezing temperatures, relentless winds, deep snow, and predatory animals created a world where survival was never guaranteed. Yet, despite these formidable challenges, early humans endured, not merely through physical strength, but through intelligence, social cohesion, innovation, and adaptability. Their lives were defined by a delicate balance: fear and courage, scarcity and abundance, vulnerability and resourcefulness. The strategies developed to endure winter: firemaking, tool crafting, clothing, shelter, cooperative hunting, and migration, were the products of observation, experimentation, and shared experience, laying the foundation for human resilience that continues to inspire us today. Winter survival demanded careful integration of multiple skills and strategies. Fire was the heart of human existence, providing warmth, light, and protection while enabling longer periods of activity during the dark months. Tools and weapons turned raw materials into functional implements, allowing for efficient hunting, preparation of food, and construction of shelters. Clothing and bedding insulated bodies from frostbite and hypothermia, while communal sleeping arrangements conserved energy and amplified warmth. Each element alone was important, but survival depended on their seamless combination, creating a holistic system that protected humans physically, psychologically, and socially. Cooperation and social cohesion were as critical as technological innovation. Ice Age humans rarely survived in isolation. Communities shared food, fire, knowledge, and protection. Roles were distributed according to skill, experience, and necessity, with elders passing wisdom, hunters sharing strategy, and younger members learning essential survival skills. Cooperation extended to all aspects of life, from hunting large game and tracking herds to fire maintenance, shelter building, and predator vigilance. This reliance on collective effort created trust, mutual dependence, and strong social bonds, showing that survival was as much about human relationships as it was about individual skill. Rituals, beliefs, and storytelling played a complementary role in survival. They provided psychological stability, structured daily life, and reinforced communal identity. Seasonal ceremonies, fire rituals, and art created meaning in an otherwise harsh environment, helping humans cope with fear, uncertainty, and death. These practices also facilitated knowledge transfer, embedding survival strategies in memory, tradition, and culture. By integrating spirituality with practical action, early humans created a framework that strengthened both their mental and physical resilience. Winter nights, long and dangerous, became opportunities for connection, learning, and preparation, rather than merely periods of vulnerability. Observation and adaptation to the natural world were central to enduring the cold months. Tracking prey, interpreting environmental signs, predicting predator behavior, and planning migrations required intelligence, patience, and foresight. Ice Age humans developed strategies to anticipate challenges and respond effectively, often over long distances and extended periods. Seasonal movements, knowledge of animal patterns, and environmental literacy allowed humans to exploit resources efficiently while avoiding unnecessary risks. Winter survival was therefore a continuous exercise in decision-making, problem-solving, and flexibility, skills that shaped the evolution of human cognition and culture. Energy conservation and sleep were equally crucial to endurance. Long, dark nights demanded periods of rest, yet vigilance could not be abandoned entirely. Communal sleeping arrangements, rotation of sentries, and careful management of fire and resources ensure that humans maintained alertness while preserving energy. The ability to balance activity with rest and risk with reward reflected sophisticated understanding of both human physiology and environmental constraints. Sleep was not passive. It was a strategic act, integrated into broader survival systems that included food management, shelter, and social coordination. Winter hunting strategies epitomized human ingenuity. Coordinated drives, ambushes, traps, and use of natural features transformed the environment into a controlled hunting ground. Weapons technology, from spears to bone-tipped tools, enhanced safety and efficiency, while communication and cooperation allowed for complex maneuvers. Hunting was both a practical and social activity, reinforcing trust, sharing, and skill transmission. Every successful kill demonstrated the combination of planning, intelligence, and collective effort that defined human survival in extreme conditions. It also provided nourishment, materials for clothing and tools, and reinforcement of social bonds, showing the interconnectedness of survival strategies. Mobility and adaptation further exemplified human resilience. Migration in search of food, safer shelters, or better hunting grounds required strategic planning, observation, and cooperation. Groups optimized routes based on predator patterns, environmental cues, and herd movements. Temporary shelters, portable clothing, and stored provisions allowed humans to endure harsh conditions while on the move. The capacity to adapt continuously to shifting landscapes ensured survival, demonstrating flexibility and foresight that were as crucial as physical endurance. These journeys reinforced social cohesion and allowed knowledge, tradition, and culture to be preserved and transmitted across generations. Ultimately, Ice Age humans thrived because of the synergy between technology, social cooperation, observation, and cultural practices. Fire, clothing, tools, shelters, hunting, rituals, and knowledge transfer formed an interconnected system that transformed harsh winter environments into manageable, navigable landscapes. Fear, scarcity, and danger were ever present, but intelligence, ingenuity, and community allowed humans not only to survive but to thrive. Winter survival was an ongoing demonstration of adaptability, creativity, and a human capacity to manipulate both nature and social structures to ensure endurance. The legacy of these strategies extends far beyond the Ice Age. Modern humans inherit cognitive abilities, problem-solving skills, and social instinct honed through millennia of navigating extreme conditions. The ingenuity displayed in winter survival, the ability to plan, cooperate, innovate, and adapt, provides a lens into the origins of human civilization, technology, and culture. Every tool, fire pit, clothing design, and hunting strategy reflects a legacy of trial, error, and refinement, showing that the foundations of our resilience lie in the challenges faced by early humans. Winter survival, at its core, was a testament to human ingenuity. Ice Age humans endured environments that tested every aspect of physical, mental, and social capacity. They combined intelligence, cooperation, observation, and innovation to create systems of survival that were sophisticated, adaptable, and effective. Their mastery of fire, tools, clothing, shelters, hunting, migration, and social cohesion transformed fear into security, scarcity into opportunity, and danger into a structured set of strategies. The lessons of these frozen landscapes remind us that human endurance is a product of creativity, collaboration, and relentless adaptability, providing insight into both our past and the enduring spirit of human resilience.